Warning, this review will contain spoilers, and if you haven't seen the episode in the last 4 days and decide to go past this point, it's your own fault, so don't get mad at me.
Yay!
Maud moving to Ponyville and Fluttershy trying to build something? These two could easily execute a perfect 10 or sink like a stone as I unexpectedly dive into another 2-episode show. Yeah, thank you iTunes, you owe me for the lateness of this one. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Pones N Stuff. The gift of Maud Pie last season underwhelmed despite a stable comedic foundation, so it's understandable that my levels of excitement for another Pie family escapade this season were notably neutered and flaccid. And after seeing this episode, my opinion of it falls directly in line with that statement. This is mostly due to the fact that I can't shake the feeling that I've seen this episode before. Think about it. Pinkie trying her damnedest to ensure someone has a friend even to the detriment of her own relationship with them, while enforcing a message and moral about loving unconditionally and respecting what others can do and their privacy to do it. It sounds a lot like Season 2's A Friend Indeed to me, with even the story structure going the same way, as Pinkie's good mood is halted, she tries to prove what she knows what to do, and it causes a bigger rift through irritating her on-screen partner in this case. And that's really frustrating to note, even more so when Party Horse is being even more outlandish and over the top than 5 years prior, for seemingly no reason whatsoever. Her attempts to zazz up a seemingly mundane episode become extremely oppressive to the point where it never got the chance to get out of first gear pace-wise, even when a minimal action scene at the end tried to spice things up, so to speak. And most of the time her zany antics didn't even come through as comedy, even neutering Maud's usually flawlessly blunt dialogue in the process. It would have ruined the episode overall if the adorable Starlight Glimmer hadn't been inserted into the story to allow a more relaxed environment and a more light-hearted tone to come through and escape Pinkie's tyranny. The piece wouldn't last for long though, as Pinkie would be straight back in there again with no legit reason other than to reinforce her role as the unlikely antagonist, much like her role in coercing Cranky Doodle Donkey to befriend her, which unbelievably did not work. And the reason why this managed to think it can get away with it is because you have a sibling relationship with Maud, meaning, oh, she can get unpunished for this. It seems baffling, but it happened. The continuity though, linking Maud and Starlight together though, that was absolute genius, and fantastically unassuming though, allowing the characters to coexist and grow as friends without it seeming jarring and forced as the main 6 originally did in Maud Pie's debut in Season 4. The story and the characters' writing served a purpose overall, which means even if Pinkie was uncomfortable to watch at times, it was done to ensure by the end of it, all 3 characters had grown, and allowed the trouble to bear more fruits than anticipated. Even though the writing and the story did have its issues, they came through rather solidly, much to my relief. And even though the message was recycled from A Friend Indeed, this episode utilised emotional depth to influence Pinkie's character development a lot more than its Season 2 counterpart ever did. Now, after looking at those positives though, you may think all seems good, but an aura of tension and awkwardness persisted throughout, much to my chagrin. So even with those positives, and with seemingly enough to support itself, this episode could never escape from Pinkie's exuberant shadow. This is especially the case when it comes to the animation and music. Considering we went from the middle of nowhere to Ponyville to Ghastly Gorge and back again, there really wasn't a lot to focus on visually. Now you may be saying to me, hey, there's more to meet the eye, but when I count only a couple of really amazing facial expressions, some design choices on the clothing environment that Pinkie and Maud mostly supplemented, and the set pieces from the waterfall and the gem cave, there really wasn't that much on show at all. Okay, there was an eel, but we've seen those before. They were nice little pieces, but they didn't translate to too much over the course of the entire episode, making it feel quite bland. But like every episode this season thus far, it's all been about the characters, not the visuals on screen. But I've I've already said that enough already, to where it, as a point, is becoming a bit too irritating to say in its own right. In the case of the music, the use of pomp and circumstance for the graduation was a nice nod to US tradition, while the contrast in tempo between Pinkie and the rest of the minimal cast's musical cues was nice, but repetitive and jarring on occasion, serving its purpose, but doing very little else, while Starlight and Maud's ones grew with volume and variety as their relationships grew, making their encounter feel a little more special. But all in all, I look at this episode and think it has some good ideas and some intentions it wanted to achieve, just not the confidence to take it into new territory and create a brand new, unique experience, which at the end of the day is very irritating to say the least. And with my final thoughts, I'm going to echo that statement. This episode didn't feel fresh despite trying its hardest to make an entertaining yet light-hearted spectacle. It couldn't escape the influences of an episode that came before it and suffered under the weight of indecisive writing of a main character. While it enabled development and continuity to flourish while stability from other areas came to support it, the episode couldn't push itself to reach for something more intriguing and interesting, and as a result, it's an episode that had consistency issues throughout that was never given a chance to rectify its problems when presented with them, willing to go on autopilot because it felt it was a safe choice. Thanks to the inclusion of Starlight Glimmer, this episode didn't make the same mistakes as last season's endeavour with Rarity, but I was left feeling the same frustration as I did 13 months ago, even if the score reflects a slight improvement. This was an episode that had a purpose, but struggled to nail down what it wanted to do and jumble things together to make it seem like a fully fledged experience. It was fine, but from these two, Pinkie and Maud, I really expect more. Overall, Rock Solid Friendship scored a total of 9 out of 25, which is a D+. Pinkie Pie is a very divisive character, and I should know, having dipped between loving and hating her depending on how good an episode's portrayal of her is. And speaking of that, in a flurry of emotions last time round, we had a really positive version of her character, using subtle cues and dialogue to highlight her unassuming intelligence, the ability to make us laugh doing pretty much anything, and, of course, her wit, which was sharp as a rock in that episode. The fact is, though, this time around, this episode highlighted her as scatterbrained, distracting, and violently overbearing to the point of insanity. At some point, the writers need to nail down a definitive version of this character, because having it shift, meaning we don't know which one we're going to get depending on the writer, is quite a dangerous precedent, because it showcases, unlike the rest of the characters in the main 6, that she hasn't really learnt her growth that prior episodes have set up, and I'm hoping we get some stability from Pinkie Pie, because the shift in tone and contrast between episodes is getting a little too grating for me. With all that in mind, will Shy Animal Horse be able to showcase herself well? It's time to look at Fluttershy Leans In. Fluttershy building an animal sanctuary. Sounds like a very simple episode, right? On paper, that premise sounds so shallow and lifeless that it would take a lot to salvage a coherent episode from it. The problem is, by the looks of it, the NLP team didn't seem to care for it enough to bother. You'd think it would be very difficult for a cartoon about magical talking pastel-coloured ponies to piss me off. Well, you'd be sadly mistaken, because when I tell you what this episode did wrong, you'll see why I left this episode wanting to murder it. However, through a sea of negatives, there were some good things that this episode did right. Musically, this episode is varied and open, giving us different genres and style contrast in certain scenes, especially in the parkour opening, Fluttershy's confident monologues, and character appearances such as Rarity, which does make me question, why the hell did Applejack not have her country twang come in when she mentioned her friend Wrangler, but then when Rarity comes in she has to talk with a cultured harpsichord in the background? It's baffling. Nonetheless, the calm and slow-tempoed Hawaiian-influenced montage song, however, takes the cake from all of it, making you feel at ease while the nature utopia is created around you. And while some aspects of the music got repeated a little too much for my liking and followed character cliches a little too much to the letter, I say Rarity again, which brings the rating down, it certainly brought more to the table than the animation did, which outside of the overly cliched character designs, which were also stereotypes, The structure and framing of the parkour scene, the set piece of the sanctuary, and one radial clock transition, it left me visually bereft as the episode starved for attention. The showcasing of Fluttershy's growth, though, through her confidence and assertiveness, highlighted how much her character has grown and changed over the seasons, which was a joy to hear and see, alongside the long-awaited return of Dr. Fauna, who had not been seen since Secret of My Excess, of course in Season 2, where she pissed off me and many others by being a childish, patronising person as you do. But thanks to Nicole Oliver, she delivered a passionate and emotion-laden performance that reminded me why this character is amazing and needs to be seen more of, and why Oliver is one of my favourite voice actors in this show, considering she voices Celestia and Cheerilee, two of my other favourites. She was the lone aspect of comedy that broke the unbearably sluggish pace and awkward tone that persisted throughout, which when you look at the negatives, it was understandable to see how this was hard to shake. I've already noted that the animation category had a very meagre and lackluster outing, and you'd think the other categories would try to support it, but sadly, they had very similarly negative performances to their name, especially the character writing and the story. Even more so for me, because I am a freelance video editor, and I've got to say, I have not seen a more blatant disregard for the worker-client relationship since Suitor for Success some 6 seasons ago. It's another recycled plot point, hallelujah, but somehow, some way, that had more life in it than this corpse of an episode. It boggles my mind how one-dimensional and flat Wrangler, Dandy Grandeur and Hardhat were. They fit stereotypes and cliches of their expertise and were so blind in not acknowledging what a contractor or worker could or would do in normality that it made me want to throttle them for their ignorance as they forced a conflict unnaturally just to give this episode a backbone, and it looked incredibly lazy while using it as an excuse to give the main 6 a role in an episode where most of them had no business being in it in the first place, making it feel top-heavy with characters who are mostly there for window dressing. On top of that, considering Fluttershy can talk to animals, she didn't even bother in attempting to resolve the Breezy-esque situation at Dr. Fauna's surgery. It meant that Gillian M. Barrow intentionally didn't factor in a key character trait just to ensure that a plot device could be salvaged from a ludicrously meagre premise. Not just to mention that, Dr. Fauna got the animals out of her office to see the finished sanctuary and then had them return to the clinic. I don't understand why she didn't have the gall to have done that from the start, and then kept them out there, as well as utilising Fluttershy's natural talents in order to help herself. It was just so idiotic, and it showed how flat, how barren the story was. And not just that, why didn't Fluttershy utilise Big Daddy McColt in the first place? Why did we need 3 unnecessary antagonist, untrustworthy contractors if you knew one off the bat? And again, it just seems like this episode was trying too hard to substantiate its own existence by shoehorning so much in that it made it bereft of any emotional investment and stability. It felt like they'd assembled poor quality ingredients to make you dinner with and ended up setting the house on fire in the process of preparing it. It was that bad. It was a dumpster fire, and the more I analyse it, the worse it gets. The story and narrative alongside most of the writing just had no rhyme or reason, no function, and it felt like this episode didn't even dare to understand its own failings and instead blindly walked into the field of battle hoping it wouldn't get found out or shot. Sadly, it was dead on arrival before it even had the chance to change. The message doesn't even get off lightly either, as the morals surrounding the desire to achieve your dreams was delivered with the strongest amount of patronising tones akin to a nursery teacher telling her pupils a minimalist and pandering tale. It also failed to really encompass the struggles it takes to reach your goals that it pertains to. And while you could say the episode itself highlights those issues, if the message itself upon statement only notes the initial thought and the reflection upon completion, it makes it feel shallow and benign instead of inspiring, looking quite tepid and reluctant in an attempt to give this episode a feel-good ending that does little to paint over the anger that it had created. I'd have rather seen a rehash of a PPOV lack of communication moral that would have made more sense because we actually got that on display. God, hell, there are so many things that would have made more sense in the episode if the writer and her team would have actually pulled their fingers out and made sure this entire premise and everything around it didn't seem phoned in, boring, and intentionally irritating. This episode was incredibly difficult to sit through as I watched it systematically destroy itself by wallowing in a story it could never make coherent, relying on force-feeding itself, plot points, character writing and conflicts, just to make it feel like it had a reason to exist. This is what happens when you take something linear and don't expand upon it enough to ensure it can work. It was boring, insulting, and structurally unsound beyond compare. Hell, the fact it managed to salvage 2 developed character performances, some small continuity, and musical variety to ensure it scraped past the bottom of the barrel in my rating scale is inspiring as well as downright infuriating, because it deserves to be ranked alongside the worst episodes I've seen in this show, but thanks to dumb luck, it avoids it by the skin of its rotting and barest teeth. It was the most pitiful of episodes I've ever seen this show make, and considering that there are some episodes that rank worse than this, it's the most baffling of things to behold, but that shows that every little thing helps, even though this episode was beyond it on so many levels. Overall, Fluttershy leans in, scored a grand total of 3 out of 25, which is an E. Come on, Season 7, you can do better than this. While I understand what this episode was trying to do, to expand Fluttershy's character to ensure its longevity by making her role as an animal caregiver even bigger, doing so without any heart, passion or care makes this episode even more depressing to look at. I mean, it's not only the worst of this season thus far, but it's also a very severe blemish on Fluttershy's near-flawless record. Because seriously, pretty much every Fluttershy episode has some good qualities, and in most cases have done very well in my ratings. And it's just really sad to see that this has propped up. It's like they thought Newbie Dash was a good idea in ruining Rainbow Dash's character to a degree. Why don't we do that but try to soften the blow and just make it a very poor episode overall in every other category? It's just horrible, and I'm hoping that this downward trend of poor episodes that's happened since All Bottled Up does not continue, because if it does, I could be looking at my first ever 0 out of 25 episode. I am hoping for the day that that does not come. I really do. Season 7, you have a lot to do to rebuild my trust, and I'm hoping next time the episode will be good. And I'm hoping to God I don't have to do another one of these 2-episode bundles again until the finale, so iTunes, you better make sure that doesn't happen. Otherwise I will be a very cross and angry man. I have been Freddie Thomas, you have been people watching. This has been another episode of Pones N Stuff for the CC Network. And I will see you all next time, hopefully in a more positive mood.